All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello, and here we are on another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and we're with you with another special guest coming in. And this time we're going to go to the other side of the spectrum where we're talking to a student just getting started in their welding career. So today I have Vikki Schembri coming in to us. Hey, Vikki, how are you doing?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Vikki, where are you in Canada right now?
I am in cold but beautiful Thunder Bay, Ontario. Just a bit north.
So how cold is it? So I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan, and we just had a blizzard. So when you say cold Thunder Bay, what kind of temperatures are we talking about?
I mean, it was probably like negative 15 today, I would say. So it's getting there. It's not at its coldest yet, but...
Oh, so we're about the same. Yeah, it's about the same. We were about minus 15 today as well, and we had a good dump of snow in the last couple of days. So have you guys gotten quite a bit of snow there?
Not a lot, but there's been a couple flurries, so which has been nice. Usually Halloween we get our first dumping of snow, but that didn't quite happen yet. So we'll enjoy being able to leave the house without having to do 30 minutes of cleaning the car.
Yeah, and you know, that's the thing, you know, usually by Halloween there's lots of snow, and it hasn't been like that this year, so we're kind of spoiled. So let's talk a little bit about where you are. You're in Thunder Bay. You were born and bred there. Were you raised in Thunder Bay, or are you from somewhere else and moved there?
No, I'm actually from Milton, so where I did my Women of Steel course, which we'll talk about. So I grew up in Milton, and I didn't really know that anything past Barrie in Ontario existed until I was doing my undergrad. I was looking for a summer job, and my friend suggested that I do forest firefighting because at the time I was a little interested in structural fire. So that's how that conversation started, and she had grown up in Sioux Lookout, and she suggested going to Pickle Lake to do forest firefighting. I was like, okay, I'll do that, and then hadn't looked at a map, didn't really know where I was going until the week before. I was like, oh, Pickle Lake is all the way up there, and that introduced me to northern Ontario. To get up to Pickle, I would have to drive through Thunder Bay, and I didn't really know much about it then, but I did a trip across Canada after my undergrad, spent 3 days in Thunder Bay. Had already realized that I really liked the North, wanted to move there. And after spending a couple days in Thunder Bay, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make this my home. So I moved up there originally for a master's degree, and now I'm doing my welding course. So yeah, it's been a long road, but I'm here now. It's been great. So I've been here for about 6 years.
6 years. Okay, so let's go back in time now. Well, actually, maybe let's start at where you are right now. How old are you right now?
I'm 29.
You're 29. Okay, so you're still a young person. You know, you've had a few good little trips. You know, in terms of career paths, which is awesome. I think that's how most people do it nowadays, and I did it the same way. So, you know, let's talk about you coming up in Milton. You know, did you what did you want to do when you came out of high school? Like you said, you went and got a degree. What was your dream as a kid coming out of high school? Like, what was it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
So when I was coming out of high school, I wanted to do structural firefighting. So at the time I was working out at a CrossFit gym, and a lot of firefighters were there, and I thought that was a really cool, physical, active job, really great work-life balance. But I had high grades in high school. I did all the maths and sciences, and I was really pushed to go to university. So I was encouraged to do university first, and then apply to firefighting after that. And so I was like, okay, I'll go to university. So I got a history and health sciences degree from University of Toronto. And doing that, like, I was really good at school, so that kind of pushed me away from pursuing the firefighting, and I thought pursuing a more academic, desk-based writing and research and policy sort of aim job. That's kind of where my mind went while I was in my undergrad, so it diverted quite a bit from right out of high school plans. But yeah, it's funny because when I did the Women of Steel program, I was thinking back to high school, and I thought back to how I really liked music, so I did music. For a while, I wanted to be a musician, but I realized that wasn't the most lucrative career to go into. I played tuba in the high school band, and I wanted to be a professional tuba player, but my parents were like, please don't do that. So I didn't. But the shop class was a couple doors down from the music class. And I remember, like, seeing people walk in and out of there, and if I was a little more adventurous at that age and a little more confident, I probably would have thought about that as a career, like some sort of hands-on, whether it was woodworking or working on cars or whatever else they were doing in the shop class. Like, I was really interested to know what went on there, but a little bit too scared and didn't feel like I could do that. So why? I'll let you ask another question.
Yeah. So why do you think you felt scared to get into the trades? Were you scared because of like what your family would think about that type of a job, or just like physically, like I don't know about trades. It looks like you could get hurt, or what was the things that maybe held you back?
Kind of family expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like when I was going through high school, a lot of what courses I chose was directed towards the university path. So even if you don't think you're going to go into the sciences, have all the sciences in case you want to do science in university. Like, do all the maths because you need those marks for university. Everything was university focused, I guess, or directed. So the trades just really didn't seem like it could be an option. It also was just sort of a different vibe, I guess. Like, I was a nerdy tuba player, and I didn't really know if I would fit in with that crowd. But at the same time, I was super creative. So I was, and I've always been creative. I really enjoy sewing and making things with fibers. And it's funny because now that I'm pursuing the trades, I'm understanding how much that skill and having an eye for things and having a steady hand and having patience and attention to detail, like how all of those skills transfer over to the trades. But at the time, it was like, this isn't as rugged as the trades. Like, I like this sort of crafty, silly thing, and it doesn't translate to this hardcore, dangerous, sparks are flying, saws are going type of job and skill set. So it didn't feel like the door was open to me, I guess.
Yeah, but it's interesting because obviously you're not afraid because you thought about going into firefighting, which is very dangerous. So yeah. It's not like fear was something that was a deterrent for you.
Mm-hmm. And I guess too, it was kind of like I didn't like, and it's as much as I was encouraged to do university. Like, my whole dad's side is tradespeople. So my dad, he's a electrical technologist. So he has been working for Hydro. He just recently retired, but like, he loves talking about electricity and electrical grids and how they work and all that. My grandpa is a plumber. Uncle's an electrician. Like, I grew up with whenever something in the house needed to be done, my dad did it or someone else in the family did it. And when, like, when we needed sewing done, my mom did it. So it was a very, like, a lot of self-sufficiency in terms of, like, the skills that my family had that I really valued. And that's what I think I saw in the trades was, like, this sense of, like, I can make things happen. I can fix things. I understand how things work, and I am not relying on someone else to help me fix the thing. But yeah, I think it was a lack of familiarity in a lot of ways. So with firefighting, like I had this access to this group through the gym that I went to, and I could, I was hanging out with them. I could be friends with them. I kind of saw myself in that space with those types of people, and I guess just I wasn't really exposed to as many tradespeople in my high school years, so like I didn't know if like if I would feel comfortable in that space with those personalities or with that work ethic or with those just those challenges. So it was so unfamiliar to me that that was the scary part to me.
Yeah.
The sort of
Now, when you went to school, you finished your degree, and what was the plan then? So you decided to kind of maybe do a little bit more academic pathway. Where was your first kind of gigs? What did you start doing for a living then?
Well, I decided to not do work right away. So after I finished my undergrad, so again, like I was good at school. I was good at writing. I was good at reading. And like I did well on exams and in class participation and everything, but I finished with this degree in history and health sciences, but I didn't really feel like I had any skills, and I wanted to just not think for a while. So I actually did a bike trip across Canada. So I cycled from BC to Newfoundland, and that was really eye-opening because when you leave your bubble and you see what else is going on in the world and other places you can live and other things you can do, that was really refreshing. But when I was done that, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I decided to go back and do my master's, and that's I went to Lakehead and I went to Thunder Bay, and that was sort of my segue into living in the north. And that was, again, like school and reading and writing was kind of my safe space and what I knew. And in my head, I was like, well, another degree under my belt, like that's only going to help me in terms of job prospects. But I didn't really have a set direction. I just had that safe space to go back to. So I went and I did my master's degree. And partway through, I had a not so great experience with mental health issues in terms of anxiety and depression, so I took some time off. And during that time, I returned back to my creative side, so I hadn't really sewed in a while. I hadn't really done art in a while. And I got a job working at a cafe. I started sewing and I started selling the stuff that I sew online. So I had this side hustle, Gaudy Grandma, if anyone wants to find me on Instagram. And I found a way to express myself through art and just move my hands. And it's just interesting, like it was really refreshing to use a part of my brain that I hadn't really used in the academic side of things, where I see my creative side as I actually turn off my brain and just let my hands do the work. And I get to kind of sit back and enjoy the show that I put on for myself. And so as I was doing that, I realized that I really enjoy working with my hands. Not to sound conceited, but I'm good at it. Like I like making things. It sells well. I have a great audience. And so I worked at a cafe for a bit. I got a job after that as a writer and editor for a online fitness retailer. And again, I kind of went back to these skills of reading and writing that I'm comfortable with, but I don't necessarily love doing. And after doing a desk job for 2 years, I was like, you know what? I need to do something different. I think maybe I'm really enjoying this creative side. Maybe something like the trades, which I've always kind of had an interest in, but always been too scared to do. Maybe I can start trying that out. And so I Googled free trades, women, that basically into Google to see what could come up that was a free program that I could try out, because I wasn't necessarily ready to sign up for another year or two of school for something that I didn't know if I liked or not. And this too was also while I was taking my mental health leave for my master's. So signing up for more school wasn't really the top of my list. And then COVID hit. So I had actually signed up to do the Women of Steel program. The week that everything shut down was the week I was supposed to be in Milton for the Women of Steel program. So that all kind of took a back seat. COVID, though, I was able to work from home. Working from home gave me the sort of space and time that I needed to also complete my master's degree. So that got finished. And just after that, I got an email saying that the Women of Steel program was on again for July of this year. And so I did that. As soon as I finished that course, I realized that I really, really liked welding. And now was as good a time as ever to try it out. And so that's when I applied to do it at Confederation College. So it's been kind of a long, convoluted path. But moving away from what I was comfortable with and what was sort of my fallback plan every time, and realizing that the fallback plan wasn't bringing me joy and wasn't it's comfy, but comfort doesn't feel good when it's boring, or when it's not really what we want to be doing.
That's amazing. I got some questions here during your talk. I mean, obviously there's some definite highlights that I want to ask a question about. First of all, what the heck made you want to ride a bike across Canada?
So a lot of boredom, a lot of just not having the money to buy a car and do it. And it's funny because I thought about it. I was riding my bike to work in Toronto. So I was working at a butcher shop my last year of my undergrad, and I biked 5K there, 5K back. I was like, I really like biking. I was like, maybe I'll bike somewhere. Like, maybe I'll do a trip. And I was like, oh, what if I went across Canada? Like, do people do that? And I Googled it, and a lot of people do it. There's a guidebook that tells you which streets to turn left on to get to, it's a step-by-step guide, suggested places to stop and camp and whatever. So I was talking to a friend in my class about it, and, we were talking about post-graduation plans. I said, we'll bike across Canada, and she said, you know what, maybe I'll do that too. And, we decided to actually pursue it. But it was a great way to just spend the summer. It was a way to, I wanted a break. I wanted to just move after thinking for 5 years and didn't really want to think too much. And it was awesome. Canada is a really cool country. It's big.
So how long did it take? How long did it take to get from one end to the other?
We started May 18th in Victoria, BC. And my friend Dominique and I, we originally planned to just do the West Coast. So she has family in Calgary and Vancouver, so we stayed 10 days here, 10 days there. Like, really took our time and took breaks and, vacation days as needed. So we got back I rolled into Milton mid-September. And then when we had passed through Ignis in Northern Ontario, we met this girl, Kat, who was doing Winnipeg to Halifax. Her and I became pretty good friends, and right off the bat. And I've always been interested in seeing the East Coast, so I decided to continue with her. So leaving Milton mid-September, we reached the edge of Nova Scotia about mid-October. So 1/3 of the country took us 1 month. The rest of it took us close to 4. So we really took our time with that first bit.
And then when you get to the end, do you have to put your bike on a plane and fly home, or do you have to bike home?
No.
How does that work?
So, in both cases, we flew out to Victoria with the bike. So you put your bike in a box, and then you assemble it and start biking. And then, so I spent some time in Newfoundland after. I took the ferry across and took a bus to the other side of Newfoundland and spent some time out there. And when I was ready to go home to Milton, I packed it onto a plane. Yes.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. That sounds amazing. All right. So, and we got to get to welding, but I still got more questions.
Yes.
But the next question I had is, what is your master's in? What did you take your master's in?
I did my master's degree in health sciences. So pretty much a continuation of what I was studying in my undergrad at U of T.
Okay.
Which it's health studies in some areas, it's health sciences in others, but it's looking at the social determinants of health, the way that like our politics, our economy, social systems, cultural systems, how all of that affects access to health and health-related systems. And so when I did my master's, though, I focused more on food security and food sovereignty and access to food and food systems in northern provincial Canada.
Okay, that's super interesting. I'd love to have a conversation just about that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
All right, this is a perfect time to take a break. We're going to take a break for our sponsors here, and then when we get back with Vikki, we're going to talk about the beginning of her welding journey, which, started after her meandering across the country on a bicycle, her 8 years of university, and her travels in living in all over different types of places. So it sounds like a really good place to pick up. So make sure you don't go anywhere. Come back here to the show at the CWB Association podcast. We'll be back right away. And we're back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and thanks for staying with us. We have Vikki Schembri here talking about her journey as a young person coming up in Canada and, kind of just having adventures and sounds like, living by the seat of her bike pants. And, now we are at the point where she has come off of a break, almost a nature insured break from COVID that kind of pushed in and ended up taking the Women of Steel program. So the Women of Steel program is a program that's funded by the CWB Foundation here in Canada. And can you tell us, I guess, a little bit about how that program was? What was it about? How long did it take? What did you learn? And your experience of the Women of Steel camp?
Yeah, so it was 1 week long, and thankfully it was in Milton where my family is, so I was able to stay with them and, do a short drive over to the CWB building. And I think there was 11 of us in the class. It ranged from, there were some people who had done welding in high school. There are some people who had bought a welding machine from Canadian Tire and had that in their garage and they were working on their truck with it, to people like me who, were interested in welding but just hadn't had an opportunity yet to try it. So a wide range of women, so all women, were there to try it out and to hone in their skills. And we spent time doing blanking now.
Some MIG welding, some stick
MIG welding, that's
yes.
the one. MIG welding. We've been doing stick in class for the past 3 weeks. So when I close my eyes, all I see is a stick weld. But yes, we did some MIG welding. And we actually came out of it with the CWB certifications as well. So we were able to get our welding tickets, which was really cool. And it was the perfect environment for me coming in, having this interest in welding, but also not really sure how interested in welding I was. A lot of new terms, a lot of new tools, a lot of new things in general. And being surrounded by other people who weren't super familiar with it, also being surrounded by women my age, it was just a super comfortable place to ask questions. I had a lot of questions. It was really cool that we had speakers come in too, and they were able to talk about their experience with welding and how they got into it and what they do. And it was, as much as when I was younger looking at the trades and couldn't see myself fitting in with that life, spending that week in the Women of Steel program and especially seeing the speakers come in and talk about their journey with welding, it was like, these are my people. Like, I didn't know that these are my people. I didn't think that they were my people. But especially, I think her name is Nikki Noble, and she's the program coordinator at Lambton College. She was talking about how she is very restless when it comes to work, and she always wants to be doing something new. She switches around things, like, once she gets to know something too well, she's bored and she wants to move on to something else. And I was like, that is me. And I thought this was something that I'd have to fight my entire life, like fight this urge to do something else, because it looks bad on a resume to have short jobs. It's, you shouldn't be bored at work. You should, like, there are all these things that I thought were bad qualities that were going to be a challenge forever. But the way how she talked about her welding journey, it's like, well, no, if I get bored, I can do the inspection course at the CWB and become a welding inspector. If I get bored of that, then I can maybe talk to the college and see what sort of teaching opportunities are there. If I get bored of that, then I can learn more about the welding robotics and kinetics and understand how that comes together and be a consultant for, it was this really awesome experience of A, learning the skills, B, learning what direction I could go in, and C, just like understanding that, that quiet little voice that I've been hearing my whole life saying, maybe the trades are right for you, that I've been ignoring or kind of not listening to. Like, I'm listening now, and I'm really happy that I decided to. So,
and that's a very, interesting point that you bring up, is the width or spread of the trades. It's something that's really interesting because, very much in society, there's this concept that welders or the welding trades are those people, and it's that industry or that type of life or this thing. What people don't realize is that welding is every demographic: the nerd, the jock, the tough guy, the little girl, the tall, the short, the wide, the good in school, the not good in school, the good writer, the good artist, the good, everything, every type of demographic that exists as a human, there's a job in the steel trades that will fit them, because it's just such a wide trade. It covers everything from the desk I'm sitting at to the train to the building. Like, there's just so many different things.
And even when you think about, like, the more I'm doing it, the more that I'm also understanding how even indirectly and directly my sewing side also comes out, where there's this local lady that makes the beanies, right, that we wear, the welding caps. And it's like, I could sew these. My instructor, who is, I've told him about my gaudy grandma stuff, and he got all excited when he heard about it. And he's actually, I'm going to be working with him on making my own welding caps. So, like, he has an old welding helmet that we're going to cut out the eye part, and then we're going to add leather to the top and the bottom, and I get to design how I want the leather to be and decide if I want to, like, add paint or emboss it. Like, there's all these, like, secondary parts of welding that, like, even if you're not working directly with the metal, like, there are other things around it that I'm totally excited about and I have the skills for, and, like, there's so much more than just, putting a metal or, like, putting a bead on something, right? There's so many other aspects of it that create opportunities for, like you said, like, anyone to get involved in some way, shape, or form, to, like, enjoy it. And I just saw
a statistic literally this week from a report that less than 3% of the welding community has a postgraduate degree. And that is the smallest representation of welders. 60-some% have at least high school, and then there's like 20 to 30% that 60% has at least some post-secondary, 20% has high school, and like 10% has lower than high school education. So the vast majority of welders are well educated to at least some post-secondary, but a very small percentage actually has a degree or further with their welding, in addition to their welding education. And let me tell you that is a very, very good position to be in. Having a university education and your welding certification opens up a whole nother set of doors that need to be opened in society to bridge that sense between academia and the trades that people don't realize is there, whether it's through writing, like right now, like, we have a magazine at CWB Association, the Weld magazine, and we're always looking for people to submit articles. And generally 99% of the time, well, maybe not that much, but a large percentage of the time, the articles are coming from engineers, because engineers are educated and they know something about welding. But we don't get a lot of articles from welders that know how to write, like the other end of the spectrum. So let me tell you, Vikki, if you still like to write, we're always looking for articles, and they don't have to be that technical. They can just be about weld life, about welding journeys, welding experiences, because that's part of the fabric that makes welding community, right?
I actually, after the Women of Steel course, I emailed Daniela. She was like, "Hey, like, I wrote this reflection piece about the Women of Steel program, and if you want to use it." So I'm definitely like interested in talking about my experience, a day in the life of a student welder. Because like I feel like that is. It's something that I do want to, like, I don't necessarily want to leave the academic writing, reading realm behind. I would like to integrate it a bit. And even with the health sciences, health studies stuff that I've done. So I did work and research with northern communities, even like indigenous communities, First Nations communities. And there's quite a bit of information about how much the education systems can be improved in terms of just more resources, getting teachers and getting people qualified to teach. All of that is a bit of a struggle. But I also think like exposure to careers and things you can do when you're done school, because like if you've never tried welding before, how are you going to know if you want to do it or not? How are you going to that can motivate you to pursue stuff through high school and after high school? And I've even been thinking about what about increasing exposure to the trades in northern communities? Like what about getting a bunch of welding machines and flying them up to different communities and exposing kids to it and getting them excited about future career paths? So it's that sort of I feel like that side of my brain that is interested in access, interested in education and spreading the word, and again, the social determinants of health, that aspect of it, where a lot of our health issues are tied to economic issues, and not having a job is or not having a job that pays all of your bills, that's really tied to the health of a person and their family and their community. So while welding isn't necessarily directly related to my health studies and health sciences background, bridging what I've learned about that to welding, and just increasing people's access to it, opportunities to learn about it, opportunities to pursue a job that is exciting, is booming, is well paid. Understanding how I can bridge those two is definitely on my mind.
Well, and there is direct connections, and it's coming more to the forefront all the time. 20 years ago, well, almost 30 years ago when I started welding, it was a lot of okay, well, you're the kind of the leftovers of society, and this is what you end up doing, and even with that attitude, it was funny because it was oh yeah, you're just a welder, you're gonna go do this grunt work. Meanwhile, I'm making more money than all my friends. I have full benefits and an awesome pension. So they're kind of making fun of me for having this quote unquote shady job, but really I'm in a better position life wise than any of them, right? and over this 30-year spread, the stigma's slowly been coming off, where it's no, I went to university and I chose to be a welder. There's a difference, and because it was more opportunities. I've never been unemployed. I've never had any issues finding work. I've had full benefits. I've never had to worry about the dentist or the doctor or eyeglasses, any of that stuff. I've never had to worry about that stuff my entire life, which I don't think many Canadians can say, right? So this is a thing that people aren't aware of. And when talking about northern communities, indigenous communities, remote communities, one of the biggest issues that we had, and this is something our company works on now, is we've talked about how do we ship up a dozen welders up to a northern community to show them welding. The problem is that they don't even have the infrastructure. Like, we couldn't even plug those machines in. Like, we don't even have
Right, yeah.
the power to, but
Especially
now
places that are running on generators.
that's
yeah,
right.
stuff
But
like that.
now with
Yeah.
simulator technology, now we're looking at, well, maybe we can use simulators that just run off 110, and we can at least do some replicant education through sim and VR work of what these jobs are kind of like, give you a taste of it, and then see it, and then we can work out the funding later, because there is funding, right? But it's a matter of, what do I want to fund? So if I'm a young student and I say, okay, maybe I can access funding, well, 99% of the people around you are going to say access that funding to go to university, and you'll fly into one of the main centers and you'll go to university, and then you'll be in line for one of the 4 jobs available for the 6,000 graduates. And no one says, well, why don't you go to college to be a tradesperson, where you literally have a job before you even graduate?
Yeah, it's so I have this friend who is an iron worker, and my partner is a lawyer, and multiple times my partner has been like, I like law, but Jordan, our iron worker friend, like, he's been working and being paid for it since he was out of high school. He's a Red Seal iron worker at the age of 30. Like, I guess he's in a union, so there's been a couple of times that he hasn't had work, but like, he had fun delivering pizzas for a month while he did. Like, it wasn't ever, pinching pennies. It wasn't ever like, I got to pay off this huge loan. Like, he's been comfortable. He's been taken care of. And yeah, like he has a pension. Like, there's all these things that, you have when you pursue a trade that you otherwise don't get when you're going to university. You're 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 or however many in your graduating class. My generation is the most overqualified generation, and that's not getting us much. It's actually hurting a lot of people because they're overqualified for jobs. Or now you have an undergrad, but that doesn't mean anything when everyone's got an undergrad. So now you got to get a master's, and it turns into this treadmill of qualifications. And yeah, like, I'm happy I'm doing it now. Part of me wishes that I had done it sooner. But there is that stigma and this misconception of like, oh, but you're too smart to do the trades. Like, what does that mean? Like, that was kind of something that I was told. It's like, but even if that was in any way true, wouldn't that put me at an advantage? Like, doesn't that mean that I can, become the supervisor quicker? Doesn't that mean that I can start my own business quicker? Like, if the trades is for dumb people, then the logic isn't there in that argument, right? Like, it's not for dumb people. Anyone can do it. It requires different skills than university does, but those skills aren't any less useful and important to the fabric of our society. So stuff like that. And even when I was taking time off for my master's, someone sent me this article about people who had left academia to do completely different things. So someone started a flower shop, someone else started up a bike shop that was also a coffee shop, to get people to do bike repairs between lattes. And when I read it, part of me was like, this is me. Like, I definitely want to leave academia, do something completely different. And the other part of my brain that was mostly fueled by the anxiety and depression I was going through was, these people can't cut it. Like, that's why they did something different. And now that I've completed my master's and I'm pursuing the welding, it's like, no, those people understood that this arena wasn't the right one for them. They realized that they wanted to work with their hands. They realized that they wanted to, do like a service people-facing job. They realized that they wanted to create their own reality by bringing a flower shop that never existed into their community, or a bike shop / coffee shop that never existed. Like, And that's what I see with the trades. It's building, it's designing, it's creating. Like even today, we've been working on stick welding, and for fun, we cut out these. We did some oxy fuel cutting a couple weeks ago. We cut out these big metal fish, and now we're designing them with electrodes, with stick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this fun, artsy thing that we're doing, and it's like I get to do this when Vikki, right out of high school, was reading papers, was writing essays. Like this is way more fun. Like, and this is no less, this isn't for dumber people. Like this is just, I get to be creative. I get to make. I get to, contemplate. Okay, where do I want this line to go? What do I need to set my amps at? What do I have to hold my electrode? Like, what distance does the electrode have to be away from the metal that I'm using? Like, there's so many things that you're using your brain for that. It's just using a different part of your brain. It's not using any less of it, right? So it's been,
the statistics back what you say. There's these. You look at like and I hate using the term intelligence levels because that's not really a thing. There's so many variables to success, and intelligence is, I would say, not even near the top of that list.
I know some dumb rich people. So.
Oh, for sure. And that's kind of where I'm going with this is that I had a family doctor for a long, long time. Like basically since we came to Canada. He was a young doctor from Mexico and I'm from Chile, so he spoke Spanish. And so he was my family doctor forever because he spoke my language. So one time I had to go to a Medi Center for something, and I really didn't like the doctor that I had attend me. And so the next time I saw my family doctor, I said to him, what's up with doctors? How come there can be such a good doctor, and then the next time you see a different doctor, you feel like it's such a bad doctor? Aren't doctors supposed to be like doctor level, like doctors? Like it's this
have been certified by some process.
That's right, like some high level that we have to expect. And he sits me down and he says, what was the requirement for you to pass your welding courses? I said 70% to get my journey persons. He's like, yeah, 70%. That's right. And he goes, you know what it is to be a doctor? And I said, what? He goes, depending on the university, it could be as low as 50. And, there's no time limit. So that doctor, you might be walking in there, and he may have been in doctor school for 20 years. And he could have just tried over and over and over and over and over again and just spent $200,000 until he finally got that piece of paper that said he was a doctor, but he's actually terrible. And he goes, so there's no way of knowing, because once you get that degree with the stamp on it and put it up on the wall, it doesn't say how you did. It doesn't say if you struggled at your classes or if you were top of the class. It doesn't say if it took you 4 years or if it took you 40. All it says is that you're done. So that's something that I've always thought about, because in the welding trades, we have to recertify constantly. We have to constantly prove that we're still just as good as we were 30 years ago in order to do that job. And that's not something that other trades have. So, when we look at, intelligence versus ambition versus whatever, well, to be a welder is not easy. So just take that off the table. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm. And even at the end of, a day where we're welding in the shop all day, and we've just learned how to do vertical welds, and we're switching back and forth between electrodes, and like I get home and I'm exhausted. And aside from when I pulled an all-nighter in university or stayed up late to do an essay, like I didn't pay as much attention in class as I do now. Like now you don't pay attention, you may get a spark down your glove. Like you may, you may get arc flash. Like you have to pay attention. And again, like I would come home from my lectures and be like, okay, I think I learned some things, and study for an exam, and I'd memorize things, and just as soon as I wrote the exam, it would be out of my head. But like with the welding course, like it's muscle memory. It's as soon as you think you've got it, you got comfortable and you shifted your arm, and all of a sudden you're too far away from it's such a
there's so many variables.
so many variables, and it just requires your utmost attention. And it's really cool to be disengaged in what I'm learning, and not just feel like, okay, I got to write this essay. Who knows when it's ever going to be read ever again? Probably not. Like, what do I do with this after? And the poor TAs that have to read all of those essays about just for the sake of marking them. Versus this, like I'm building my skill every day. There's this piece of metal that I brought home from class that on one side it's the flat weld I was doing with the 6010 electrode, and it looks like garbage. It's so bad. And that was the first hour of class. And then I took a break, and on that break I was kind of like, this sucks. Maybe I'm not a good welder. And then I got my instructor to come over to my booth and just sort of look over my shoulder and like help me understand what I was doing wrong. And the other side, it looks like a completely different welder did it. And so I'm holding on to that because like there are still some days where, that voice in my head that's like, you don't belong here kind of chimes in. And I think back to, I have that piece of metal to sort of remind me like, that's temporary. Like that feeling is temporary. And if you feel it, just work a little harder. Like spend a bit more time practicing, because like practice it rewards whoever does it, right? Like that's really what you need to succeed in the trades. And yeah, it's really cool to see. It feels much more merit based in that way than university does, where it's kind of like, yeah, if you can just kind of talk your way through it, or for some people, if you can pay your way through it, like it's a piece of paper at the end. But I feel much more like the, finishing the welding techniques program, getting my tickets at the end of this, it feels a bit more legit, right? It's like, no, this is a full year of training and practicing. And when you ask me, a couple days after I get my certification to do a weld, I can do it, right? I'm not looking back at my notes saying, oh, I studied for the exam and it went in one ear out the other otherwise, right? So
yeah, you pass the test. I'm like, I couldn't even, if you sat me down in one of my 400 level university classes now and said, write the final exam, forget it. I'll get like 2%. Like you just pull that information in to just regurgitate it on test day, and you walk away from it to really never think about it again. And welding is not like that. You need those skills on the daily.
And it also feels really good to be in a position where I'm learning skills that I know I'm going to use on the job, right? Like there's so many times in my university career where like, and that's kind of why it took me so long to get the writing and editing job, because like I would look at jobs and I'm like, I don't know what skills I have to offer this position. Like I've never had much job experience. I have the school experience, but where does writing essays fall in this job description? Because that's what I spent the last 4 years doing, right? So it's really empowering to be doing something every day that, like, whether it's the actual skills that we're learning, or I'm building up work ethic and work habits where I'm not checking my phone during the day. I'm working independently. I am assessing my welds when I do them, so I can say, okay, this one looked a little thin, I'm going to go a little slower. It's all these things that I'll need to do on the job beyond just being able to put down a bead. So it's just like, it just feels so much more worth my time. It's really nice.
So now, as we get towards the end of the interview, what do you see yourself doing when you're done school? Like, do you have a little bit of a plan formulated, or are you kind of just gonna try to just see where it goes, or let me know what your thoughts are as you come towards your first year of training.
I'm really interested in pursuing a bit more of the art side of welding. So Thunder Bay, a lot of people have fire pits, a lot of people have camps that they want signs for, and I follow some metal work artists on Instagram, and a lot of it is plasma cutting, and I'm really interested in seeing where that could take me, and maybe even incorporating it in with the other aspects of the Gaudy Grandma stuff that I do. So whether that's also like, making something out of metal and then covering it in sequins. I don't know. But incorporating, like finding ways that my creativity from fiber arts and welding can coalesce and come together. And I'm really excited to just see where that takes me, because I don't really know that many other welders in Thunder Bay who are doing it for art versus structural purposes. So I'm excited to see where that takes me. And then kind of indirectly related, I've also been pursuing a job as I'm going through welding school as an energy advisor. And so that's going to people's homes, assessing how their home consumes and uses energy, and then providing advice about how to make it more energy efficient. And so even that was another area where like I've always been interested in how houses are built and how things work, and ways that like our built environment affects how we live in terms of comfort, in terms of money, in terms of how it impacts the environment. So, you know, being able to sort of get over the fear that held me back from pursuing the trades, you know, once I'm on the other side, I'm like, oh, it's not that scary over here. And the same thing has happened with this energy advisor position, where it's like, wow, this is a lot of information that I don't know. And it's like, well, I don't know it because I've never studied it. So why don't I start studying it? So related a little indirectly to welding, that's been coming up, and I'm hoping that sort of allows me to make money to pay the bills and pursue welding as more of an arts pursuit. So seeing, like, you know, not necessarily having to jump right into the first welding job that comes up, but being able to be creative with it and see where it takes me, and maybe call up these guys that are building houses out of shipping containers and see if they need a welder once a week to come by and help out. So I'm excited to just like let it happen organically. But I think that it would also be really cool to stay in touch with CWB and Confederation College, because when Daniela was describing becoming an instructor, even seeing my instructor at Confederation College and just the stuff that he gets to do and the way that he gets to work with students, I think some level of teaching or empowerment and outreach.
Mentorship, yeah.
Yeah, because the impact that the Women of Steel program had on me, like, if I could give someone else that opportunity to, like, you know, help listen to that little voice inside of them saying that maybe the trades is for you, but, like, they haven't had the chance to try it or listen, you know, there's a part of my heart that is, like, also think about outreach, think about getting more women into the trades, think about getting more people who otherwise don't have the opportunity to do it. So
well, it's awesome, and you know that's an awesome plan. And with all the people that I've interviewed, many of which are artists, I'll tell you this because I'm not an artist, but I'll tell you what I learned from them is that build it and it will sell. You know, don't be afraid. Just start building things and get up a website or Instagram page and just start putting things up for sale, and people will buy it 100%. 100%. So it's more about you just trying to be creative and let that out, and people will see that. And it's amazing. I would have never thought as a young person, I never went into the visual arts, that it would have been such a possible career. But I mean, it's something that is very common and everyone's doing quite well in that industry. So it's just a matter of being consistent and producing. Which I'm sure you learned already with your knitting, right? It's just a matter of making it and putting it out there.
Yeah, and like that's something else that, you know, when I came back from the Women of Steel program and I told my partner, I was like, I'm signing up for welding. Like, okay, that's great, but like, did you think about the other trades, or is this kind of just like a thing of convenience? And then, like, when I thought about it, I was like, I think welding is what I want to do, because it feels a bit more. Oh, sorry, that's my Chihuahua barking. You can hear that. And I feel like welding is that sort of specialization and kind of does have that bit of like danger factor that keeps people from just like buying a welding machine from Canadian Tire and just setting it up and trying it themselves. Like, I know a lot of people who have, watched a YouTube video and built the table that they want or the shelf that they want from wood. But there is that sort of like, I'm a welder and I know what I'm doing, and you can't do it by yourself if you don't know what you're doing. There's that sort of specialization.
And wood is for babies, right? So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're here at the end of the interview. This has been fantastic hearing this, crazy journey, and I love the inspirational aspects that you have, and I hope the listeners, especially if we can get these type of shows in front of young girls, that are coming up and thinking about it, this can be maybe a connection for them. And let's speak to them, as my final question for you before we wrap it up. What's the piece of advice you would give to a young female that has that little voice in her head that says, you're not really enjoying sitting behind a desk, you're not really enjoying writing or sitting through these lectures in university? What piece of advice would you give them, or maybe some guidance?
Yeah, like, don't let fear keep you from doing what could be like your calling, right? Like, there's this quote I love where it's feel the fear and do it anyways. Like, fear is going to be inevitable. Failure is also going to be inevitable. Like, the amount of times that I have tried my first weld and like, this is garbage. Like, don't judge yourself based off that. Just work through it, keep working, and that's gonna help you in the long run. And yeah, just that sort of forget everything that everyone else has told you about the trades and just focus on what the people in the trades are telling you, that A, they love their jobs, B, they make good money, C, there's always work. Like, everyone needs a tradesperson to build buildings or put up railings or, all of those things. Yeah, just do it.
Just do it. What's your problem? Just get out there and do it.
Yeah.
Well, you hear that, everybody?
Yeah. Because even now, like, there's people who are messaging me on Instagram because I'll post about my journey, and like, I wish I could do what you're doing. It's like, you can. You just gotta do it, So.
Less talk, more rock. That's what they say, right? So.
Yeah.
All right, Vikki. Well, I've had a pleasure having you on the show, and I love seeing what you're doing, and I'm gonna definitely follow your journey and see how it goes for you. Like down the road, I'm sure that I'll see some cool stuff coming out of your corner, and hopefully we can team up even with the association. And Thunder Bay used to have a very active CWB Association chapter that actually closed because of inactivity, and I would love to see another association chapter up there to get our volunteer programs running, because we do so much funding and advocacy work and facilitation work in communities across Canada, but we kind of lost our connection to the Thunder Bay area. And that's maybe something that I've been trying to look at, is see who's up there, who are the young welding and steel fabricators and engineers that are go-getters up there, because there is access to our programs and funding through chapter work. So keep that in the back of your head as you're developing your career up in the northern communities, because we need to connect with the north. There's so many talented young people up there that everyone's telling them to move to the cities to go start a new life, and that's not necessarily their jam. There's nothing wrong with staying up north and just starting your career up there, and the trades is something they desperately need. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm keeping in touch for sure.
Awesome, Vikki. Well, anything you'd like to say before we end the interview? Any shout outs or any comments?
Thank you so much for having me. If anyone wants to follow my journey, I do post about it quite a bit on my art Instagram, which is Gaudy Grandma. So GAUDYGRANDMA. And yeah, would love to chat, would love to just share my story or hear anyone else's. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome, Vikki. Well, you take care, and I'm sure we'll talk soon, all right? And for all the people that have been tuning in, thank you very much for tuning into the show. Stay tuned with it. We're rolling along awesome here, and we got some really cool guests coming up over the next few weeks, as always. You guys take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
listening to the CWB Association Welding Podcast with Max Ceron. If you enjoyed what you heard today, rate our podcast and visit us at cwbassociation.org to learn more. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions or suggestions on what you'd like to learn about in the future. Produced by the CWB Group and presented by Max Ceron. This podcast serves to educate and connect the welding community. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.
We hope you enjoyed the show.